found out my fiancé has been living a completely different life online and now I don't know who I'm actually marrying. So I never thought I'd be typing this out, but here we are. I'm sitting in my car outside a coffee shop at 2 a.m. because I can't go home right now and I just need to get this out somewhere before I lose my mind completely. My fiancé Marcus and I have been together for 4 years and engaged for 8 months, and I genuinely thought I knew everything about him until 3 days ago when my entire world just shattered into pieces I'm still trying to put back together. Marcus is a software developer and he's always been super into gaming and online communities, which I've never had a problem with. I mean, I have my own hobbies and we've always been good about giving each other space to do our own things. He works from home most days and I'm a physical therapist at a clinic downtown, so our schedules are pretty different, but we make it work. Or at least I thought we were making it work. About a week ago I was doing laundry and I needed to check my email real quick because my phone was dead and charging in the other room. Marcus had left his laptop open on the bed before heading out to grab groceries, and I figured he wouldn't care since we've used each other's devices before. When I opened it up, there was this Discord server active that I'd never seen before. There were messages actively coming through and I wasn't trying to snoop, but one of them caught my eye because it said something like, "Dude, your wife is going to kill you if she finds out you spent that much." Now Marcus and I aren't married yet and I'm definitely not his wife, so my brain immediately went to okay, maybe this is some inside joke with his gaming friends or something. But then I saw his username on the server and it wasn't his usual gaming tag. It was something completely different and his profile picture was of some random guy I didn't recognize. I know I should have just closed it and asked him about it later, but my heart was already racing and I scrolled up a bit to see what they were talking about. Turns out Marcus has been telling this entire community of like 300 people that he's married to someone named Sophie, that he has 2 kids aged 6 and 9, that he works as a financial consultant in Seattle, which is wild because we live in Portland and he's never worked in finance. He'd been posting photos that he claimed were of his family, but they were just random stock photos or pictures he'd apparently pulled from other people's social media. I kept scrolling and it got worse and worse. He'd created this whole elaborate backstory about his fake life. He talked about his fake wife's career as a nurse, his fake kids' activities and school problems, his fake marriage troubles, and how they were going to therapy. He even posted about family vacations they'd supposedly taken to places Marcus and I had actually gone together, but he'd reframed all the stories to be about his imaginary family. There were months and months of messages, and he was active in this server every single day, sometimes posting dozens of messages while I thought he was just working or gaming. I felt physically sick reading through it all and I had to run to the bathroom to throw up. When I came back I took pictures of everything on my phone because some part of me knew he might try to deny it or gaslight me into thinking I'd misunderstood. Then I closed the laptop and just sat there for probably an hour trying to process what I'd just discovered. Marcus came home around 6 p.m. and acted completely normal, asked about my day, kissed me hello, started making dinner like nothing was wrong. I didn't say anything that night because I honestly didn't know what to say. How do you even bring something like that up? Hey honey, I noticed you've been living an entire fake life online with a fake wife and fake kids. What's that about? I barely slept and I kept looking at him wondering who this person actually was. The next morning I called in sick to work because I couldn't focus on patients when my whole life was falling apart. After Marcus settled into his home office for the day, I checked his laptop again and he'd been active on the server that morning talking about how his fake son had a soccer game that weekend. I finally confronted him that evening and it went about as badly as you'd expect. I showed him the pictures I'd taken and asked him to explain what was going on. At first he tried to play it off like it was just roleplay or creative writing practice, said everyone on that server knew it was all made up and they were basically writing collaborative fiction together. But I'd read enough of the messages to know that wasn't true. These people believed him and he'd never indicated any of it was fake. When I pushed back he got defensive and said I was invading his privacy and had no right to go through his computer, that this was exactly why he needed a space that was just his own. I asked him why he needed to pretend to be married to someone else when he was literally engaged to me in real life, and he didn't have an answer for that. He just kept saying I wouldn't understand and that it wasn't hurting anyone. We argued for hours and he eventually admitted that he'd started doing this about 2 years ago when he was feeling stressed about work and our relationship. He said creating this alternate life felt like an escape and it just spiraled from there. He claimed he never meant for it to get so elaborate, but the people on the server were supportive and he liked the validation he got from them. When I asked if he'd ever pretended to be married to someone else on other platforms, he got quiet and wouldn't answer, which basically told me everything I needed to know. I asked him if he even wanted to marry me or if this was his way of living out some other life he wished he had instead. He swore he loved me and wanted to marry me, but his words felt hollow after everything I'd learned. How could I believe anything he said when he'd been lying so extensively for 2 years? I told him I needed space and I'd been staying at my friend Rachel's apartment for the past 3 days. He's been texting and calling constantly saying we need to talk and work through this. But I don't even know where to start. The thing that keeps messing with my head is that I have no idea what else he might be lying about. If he could construct this entire fake reality and maintain it for years, what else is he capable of hiding? I've been going through our whole relationship in my mind trying to figure out what was real and what might have been part of some other narrative he was spinning somewhere else. I checked our bank accounts, and there's nothing suspicious there. I asked some of his friends if they'd noticed anything weird, and they all seemed genuinely confused. Rachel thinks I should call off the wedding and break up with him immediately. She says anyone who can lie that extensively for that long isn't trustworthy and I deserve better. My sister thinks I should at least try couples counseling to understand why he did this before making any permanent decisions. My mom doesn't know the full story, but she can tell something's wrong and keeps asking if everything's okay with the wedding planning. I'm supposed to be making final decisions about the venue and sending out invitations, but how can I do any of that when I don't even know if this wedding should happen? We have deposits down on everything and family members have already booked travel. My dress is being altered right now and I'm supposed to pick it up next week. The thought of going through with this marriage terrifies me, but the thought of canceling everything and ending a 4-year relationship is somehow equally terrifying. Marcus sent me a long email yesterday saying he's deleted all the fake accounts and left all the servers, that he's willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild trust and prove he's committed to our real life together. He suggested therapy, both individual and couples, and said he knows he messed up badly, but I can't shake the feeling that he's only sorry because he got caught. If I hadn't accidentally seen that Discord server, would he have just kept this going indefinitely? Would he have maintained his fake family throughout our entire marriage? I keep thinking about all the times he was on his computer or phone and I assumed he was working or gaming with his regular friends. How many of those times was he actually living out this other life? How many conversations did he have with fake Sophie while I was sitting right next to him on the couch? Did he tell his fake wife he loved her? Did he create fake problems in that fake marriage that mirrored real problems in our actual relationship? The worst part is that some of the things he posted about his fake life were clearly better than our real life. His fake wife apparently loved cooking elaborate meals and they had these perfect family dinners every night. Meanwhile, I can barely boil water and we usually eat takeout or simple stuff. His fake kids were involved in all these activities and he wrote about being so proud of them. He told his online friends that his fake marriage had rough patches, but they always worked through everything and came out stronger. It made me wonder if this fake life was everything he actually wanted and our real relationship was just the consolation prize. Like maybe he created the perfect family and life he wished he had because ours wasn't measuring up. When I asked him about this, he insisted that wasn't true, but how can I know for sure? I don't even know what I'm asking for here. I guess I just needed to write this all out because it's been consuming every thought I have. My friends and family can only hear me process this so many times before they get exhausted, and I feel like I'm going crazy trying to figure out what to do. Has anyone else dealt with something like this? Is this something a relationship can come back from, or am I being naive to even consider it? Update 3 weeks later. Okay, so I didn't expect so many people to respond to my original post, and I appreciate everyone who took time to share advice and similar experiences. I'm sorry it's taken me this long to update, but honestly things have been a complete mess and I needed time to figure out what was even happening. After I made that first post, I stayed at Rachel's for another week and Marcus kept trying to reach out constantly. He sent flowers to my work, which was mortifying because my coworkers asked what the occasion was and I had to make up something vague. He showed up at Rachel's building twice during that week, but she refused to let him up and told him he needed to give me space. Finally, I agreed to meet him at a neutral location to talk because I knew I couldn't avoid him forever. We met at a park near our apartment and he looked terrible, like he hadn't been sleeping or eating properly, which I guess made me feel slightly less awful about the fact that I also looked like a disaster. He immediately started apologizing and saying he'd been doing a lot of thinking about why he created those fake personas and what it meant about him as a person. He said he'd already contacted 3 therapists and had an appointment scheduled. I asked him straight out if there were any other fake lives or personas he'd been maintaining, and he admitted there were 2 other Discord servers where he'd done similar things but not as extensively. In one he was apparently a single dad and in another he was a divorced guy who worked in construction. Hearing that made me want to throw up all over again because it meant this wasn't just one isolated thing. This was a pattern of behavior he'd been engaging in across multiple platforms for years. He tried to explain that he'd started doing it during a really low period when he was dealing with imposter syndrome at work and felt like he was failing at adult life. Creating these alternate personas where he had his life together and people respected him made him feel better temporarily. He said it was like an addiction where he knew it was unhealthy but couldn't stop. Every time he tried to quit he'd end up going back because the real world felt too overwhelming. I asked him why he couldn't have just talked to me about feeling stressed or inadequate, and he said he was ashamed, that he didn't want me to see him as weak or think I'd made a mistake agreeing to marry him, which is ironic because lying to me for 2 years and creating fake families made me question everything way more than him just being honest about struggling with mental health would have. We talked for almost 3 hours, and by the end of it I told him I needed more time, that I appreciated him being honest now, but I still didn't know if I could trust him or if our relationship could survive this. I said if he was serious about therapy and working on himself, then he needed to do that for himself, not just to win me back. He agreed and said he understood if I ultimately decided I couldn't move forward with him. I ended up extending my stay at Rachel's for another week, and during that time I did a lot of thinking about what I actually wanted. I made a list of all the reasons I fell in love with Marcus in the first place and all the good times we'd had. Then I made another list of all the red flags and issues in our relationship that I'd maybe been ignoring. The second list was longer than I wanted to admit. Beyond the fake personas thing, there were other patterns of him not being fully present or honest, times when he'd be vague about where he was or what he was doing, instances where he'd make plans with me and then cancel last minute for reasons that seemed legitimate at the time, but now I wasn't sure. I realized I'd been making excuses for behavior that bothered me because I didn't want to seem controlling or untrusting. I also started individual therapy because I figured I needed to process this with a professional and not just rely on my friends who were all biased toward either staying or leaving. My therapist asked me a lot of questions about what I needed to feel secure in a relationship and whether I thought Marcus was capable of providing that. She didn't tell me what to do, but she helped me realize that trust once broken is incredibly difficult to rebuild, and both people have to be fully committed to doing the work. About 2 weeks after my original post, I went back to our apartment when I knew Marcus would be at his parents' house for the weekend. I needed to get more of my stuff and I wanted to look around with fresh eyes. Being in our space felt surreal, like I was looking at someone else's life. I saw all our photos together on the walls and the wedding planning binder on the coffee table, and I just felt empty. I looked through his computer one more time because I needed to verify he'd actually deleted everything like he claimed. He had deleted the Discord accounts, but then I found something else that changed everything. Buried in his email inbox there was an exchange with someone named Allison from about 6 months ago. The messages had a tone that was way too familiar and flirtatious. Nothing explicitly sexual, but definitely inappropriate for someone in a committed relationship. She was asking when they could meet up again, and he was being vague but not shutting it down. I confronted him about it immediately over the phone. He admitted that Allison was someone he'd met through one of his Discord servers. She lived in Portland too, and they'd gotten coffee a few times after bonding over their quote shared interests, which apparently meant bonding over the fake lives they were both creating online. He swore nothing physical happened between them, but said there was emotional overlap that probably crossed a line. He claimed he'd stopped talking to her months ago when he realized it was inappropriate. That was my breaking point. The fake personas were one thing, but having an emotional connection with another real person while engaged to me was something else entirely. I told him I was done and that I couldn't do this anymore. He begged me to reconsider and said the thing with Allison meant nothing, but I didn't believe him, and honestly I didn't care anymore. I was exhausted from trying to figure out what was real and what was another lie. I moved the rest of my stuff out that weekend with Rachel's help, and I've been staying in a short-term rental while I figure out more permanent housing. We had to tell our families that the wedding was off, which was horrible. My mom cried and his parents tried to convince me to give him another chance, but I held firm. Some of our mutual friends have taken his side and think I'm being too harsh. They say everyone makes mistakes and mental health struggles are real, but the friends who know the full story have been supportive of my decision. Canceling all the wedding vendors was a nightmare, and we lost most of our deposits, which sucked financially, but I kept reminding myself it was better than going through with a marriage I didn't believe in. My dress shop was actually really understanding and said they'd give me store credit if I ever needed it in the future, which was nice, even though I can't imagine getting married to anyone else anytime soon. Marcus has tried reaching out a few times, but I've asked him to stop contacting me unless it's about dividing up our shared belongings or financial stuff. He's still going to therapy apparently, and posted something vague on social media about growth and learning from mistakes. Some people commented asking if we were okay, and he didn't respond, which I appreciated. The last thing I wanted was our breakup becoming public drama. I'm doing okay considering everything. Some days are really hard and I miss the version of Marcus I thought I knew. I miss our routines and the future I thought we were building together. But then I remember that a lot of what I miss was probably never real to begin with. He was always holding parts of himself back and living partially in these fantasy worlds. I deserve someone who is fully present and honest. My therapist says I'm grieving not just the relationship but also the loss of the future I'd envisioned, and that's completely normal. She's helping me work through trust issues so I don't carry this baggage into future relationships. I'm focusing on work and spending time with friends and trying to figure out who I am outside of being Marcus's fiancé. So yeah, that's where things are now. Single, living alone, no wedding. Just trying to rebuild and move forward. It's not the update I wished I could give, but it's the honest one. Thanks again to everyone who commented on my original post. Reading other people's experiences with similar situations helped me feel less alone in all of this. Final update 5 months later. I wasn't planning to post another update, but some people DM'd me asking how things turned out, so I figured I'd close the loop on this whole situation. A lot has happened in the past few months, and I'm in a very different place than I was back in June. First off, I'm doing much better mentally and emotionally. I found a great apartment in a neighborhood I love and I've been decorating it exactly how I want without having to compromise with anyone. I got a promotion at work which came with a significant raise, and I've been taking on more challenging cases which has been really fulfilling. I joined a book club and started going to a climbing gym which has helped me meet new people outside my usual social circle. The therapy has been incredibly helpful and I've learned a lot about my own patterns in relationships. My therapist pointed out that I have a tendency to ignore red flags and make excuses for people's bad behavior because I don't want to seem demanding or difficult. Working on setting better boundaries and trusting my instincts has been a major focus. I'm not dating anyone right now, and honestly, I'm really enjoying being single and figuring out what I actually want. As for Marcus, we had to see each other a few times to sort out shared belongings and close our joint bank account. Those interactions were awkward but civil. He seemed like he was doing better too and mentioned he was still in therapy and had started medication for anxiety. I didn't ask for details because it wasn't my business anymore, but I hoped he was actually dealing with his issues. About 2 months ago, his sister reached out to me, which was unexpected. We'd always gotten along well and I felt bad that our breakup probably affected her too. She wanted to meet for coffee and I almost said no, but curiosity got the better of me. When we met up, she apologized for reaching out and said she understood if I didn't want to talk about Marcus, but she felt I deserved to know some things. Apparently, after we broke up, Marcus had a pretty serious breakdown and his parents had to get involved. He'd stopped going to work and was spending entire days online in various communities under different personas. His company put him on medical leave and his parents convinced him to do a short inpatient program for internet addiction and underlying depression. He was there for about 6 weeks, and according to his sister, it really helped him start to unpack why he'd been using fantasy lives as a coping mechanism. She told me that growing up, Marcus had always struggled with feeling like he wasn't good enough. Their dad had very high expectations and was emotionally distant. Marcus basically learned to create these perfect versions of himself to get approval, and that pattern continued into adulthood through the online personas. She wasn't excusing what he did to me, but wanted me to understand there was real pain and dysfunction behind it. I appreciated her telling me, but I also made it clear that while I had empathy for what Marcus had gone through, it didn't change my decision to end the relationship. She understood and said she respected that. We actually still text occasionally now, which is nice because I genuinely liked her as a person. The weird part came about a month ago when I ran into Marcus at a mutual friend's birthday party. I debated not going because I knew he might be there, but I decided I wasn't going to let him dictate where I could or couldn't show up. When we saw each other, there was this awkward moment, but then he came over and asked if we could talk outside. We sat on the back patio and he apologized again for everything he put me through. He said therapy had helped him realize how much damage his lying and avoidance had caused not just to me but to himself. He told me he understood why I left and that he didn't blame me. He actually thanked me for holding that boundary because it forced him to confront issues he'd been running from his whole life. He said he wasn't in any online communities anymore except for one gaming group that he played with on video chat, so there was accountability and it stayed clearly in the realm of gaming. He'd been working on building real friendships and connections instead of hiding behind fake identities. He asked how I was doing and seemed genuinely interested in hearing about my life. We talked for maybe 30 minutes and it was the most honest conversation we'd had in probably years. Before we went back inside, he said he hoped someday we could be friends, but he understood if that wasn't something I wanted. I told him I wasn't sure what the future held, but I appreciated him respecting my boundaries and doing the work to get better. We left it at that and went back to the party. It was strange but also kind of cathartic to see him as a real person dealing with real problems instead of this villain I'd built up in my head. I don't know if Marcus and I will ever be friends, and I'm not particularly concerned about it either way. I've moved on and I'm building a life I'm actually excited about. I learned a lot about myself through this whole nightmare, and while I wouldn't want to go through it again, I also don't regret leaving when I did. One thing I've realized is that you can't save someone who isn't ready to save themselves. I could have stayed and tried to fix things, but Marcus needed to hit rock bottom and do that work on his own. Me staying would have just enabled him to keep avoiding the deeper issues. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their actions. I've also learned that trust is fundamental, and once it's broken, it's incredibly hard to repair. Maybe some people can come back from the kind of deception Marcus engaged in, but I knew I couldn't. Every time I looked at him, I would have wondered what he was hiding or if he was being honest. That's no way to live, and it's definitely no foundation for a marriage. My friends have started joking that I dodged a bullet, and honestly, they're right. Imagine if I'd married him and then found out about all of this. Imagine if we'd had kids and then I discovered he was living all these fake lives online. Better to find out before making that permanent commitment, even though it was painful at the time. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future now. I'm open to dating eventually, but I'm not forcing it. I'm happy with my work and my friends and my little apartment with its ridiculous collection of houseplants. I'm learning to trust myself again and not second-guess my instincts. I'm building a life that's fully real with no hidden personas or secret narratives. So that's the final update, the engagement that ended before the wedding, the fake lives that destroyed a real relationship, the painful growth that came from walking away. I'm okay and Marcus seems to be working on being okay, and that's honestly the best outcome either of us could have hoped for given how everything unfolded. Thanks to everyone who followed this saga and offered support along the way. It meant more than you know.